His boss threw my clothes at my husband to humiliate him. When I laughed, my husband's face got red and, "Hello, Reddit. My name is Alicia. For privacy's sake, only my name is real and the others are just made up but represent the people I'd be mentioning in the story. So, hi again, I'm Alicia and I'm 34 years old. I came here because I'm really confused and I really need your advice, guys. You see, the thing is, I am married. I've been for about 7 years, and our relationship is about to end, or maybe has already ended, but I really don't want it to. The thing is, I thought that was what I have always wanted. For the longest time, I've always wanted Sam to be the one to end things with me, but he had always been clinging to our relationship and holding on to me. And now he finally isn't, and all of a sudden it feels like that isn't what I want anymore. It's like I just suddenly realized that I'm actually in love with Sam and don't want to lose him. I mean, he had always been that Sam that had always been available when I needed him. That Sam I had considered not manly because he wasn't exactly financially stable enough. That Sam that was always first to apologize even though I'm the one at fault. But now he's not that Sam anymore. It's like the Sam I knew just literally transformed into someone new, someone distant that I cannot even reach out to. And it's kind of my fault. No, not kinda, it's really all my fault. The thing that happened was that I had accidentally laughed when CEO threw my clothes at my husband to humiliate him. But then this happened. My husband had gotten so angry, which is very unusual of him. I mean, I've been married to him for almost 7 years, and I've known him for longer, but he had never gotten that angry before in all of our years of being together. He had gotten so angry and had left, then came back days later just to drop off divorce papers, and then had again left. I've been trying to get him to come back home so we could sort out things, but he has refused to talk to me since then. You see, my husband Dan is actually a lot older than me. He was already out of college and was working when I was still in high school. Dan lived close to my parents' place, and he had always liked me. I was smart and funny, and everyone liked hanging around me because of how popular I was. I schooled a bit far from my parents' place, so most of my friends did not know my parents. And I liked it that way because it allowed me to live the lie I wanted to live. My parents weren't exactly middle-class rich. They were very much average, and I only got into that school because of how smart I was. I was offered a scholarship throughout my high school. I had always envied the students in that school because they clearly had more than enough, and yet they weren't even easily satisfied. I was the quiet girl for a whole year when I first started with them. I studied their lifestyles, how to walk like them, and even how to brag and how to lie perfectly. I started making friends, and before long, I was popular for being one of the richest girls in school, even though in reality, I was the exact opposite. I perfected my lies very well, and it had no loopholes. I was happy while I was in school, because that meant I got to live the fairy tale life I've always dreamed of. It was the exact opposite back at home, though. My parents, though they loved each other so much, were so satisfied with their lives. It always pissed me off. I mean, Dad had the opportunity to actually earn a lot of money if he only accepted his friend's offer to become his partner. But Dad refused because he didn't want to be involved in any fraudulent acts, according to him, and my mom seemed to support that theory, which was really upsetting for me as their child. It wasn't even exactly fraudulent. It was just tweaking some figures at work and then taking the remaining for yourself. It was not like their boss was going to notice since he trusted my dad with everything so much. But Dad would never agree to take another man's money, except he worked for it. Back then, I didn't understand why he chose his integrity over money, and that had made me very ambitious. Luckily, I had the brains to go with it, but all my dreams almost crashed when I was done with high school, and I failed to get a scholarship into my dream university, and my parents didn't have the money to pay for my studies. Not that they didn't want to pay, but they wanted me to go to some nameless college and study something else because that was what they could afford. I didn't want that, and let's just say I was a very difficult child at that time. Sam, being our next-door neighbor, had always heard my parents and my arguments, so he had called me to his place one day and asked if he could sponsor my education, and I had gladly accepted the offer, but he had asked me to ask my parents first, and I knew that was going to be a strong no. But to my surprise, my parents had agreed happily for Sam to sponsor my education. They considered him the big brother I never had. My first year of university was so much fun. I was happy I had gotten into my dream school, and since Sam had lots of money then, he was able to pay for the most expensive dorm for me. It was easier then to continue my lifestyle of lies. To my new friends, my parents were in another country, and I was alone most of the time. So there was no question about where I lived before school because they filled in the rest with their heads, and I was satisfied that I didn't even have to lie further. When we finally were on a break, I went home and of course lied to my friends that I would be unreachable because I was in another country, and they had believed me. Sam was really happy to see me, and in some weird way, I was happy to see him too. Whenever my parents left for work, I'd go over to Sam's place and stay with him while he listened to my stories about school, and he'd also tell me about his work. He was on a month's leave then, so we spent quite a lot of time together. When I had to leave to go back to school, Sam was a bit sad because I had to leave, but I had promised to talk to him every chance I got. I didn't fulfill that promise because when I went back to school again, I resumed my fake life again, and so it was hard to think about anyone else. It was until my third year in university before anything romantic happened between Sam and me. I mean, by then I had gotten dating experience. My first boyfriend was Jason, a super rich, super annoying, and super rude guy whom I dated to boost my reputation and to cement the fact that I could attract any guy I wanted. Jason wasn't any more in love with me than I was with him. We both just wanted to satisfy our individual goals. Though I don't still know till now what his was, mine was just to get some money and fame through him, and it totally worked. I didn't sleep with Jason. He wanted to, of course, but I didn't want to lose my virginity to someone like that, and he got angry about it and broke things off with me. I eventually had to go home for another break, but this time I didn't go over to Sam's place per usual. I just stayed indoors all day that day. When my mom had told Sam the next day that I was around, he had been surprised I hadn't come over to say hi, and he had texted to ask if he had offended me. I had ignored his text, and when he had come over to my parents' house after he was back from work to say hi, I hadn't come out of my room and just stayed there until he left. Mom had been suspicious and had asked me what happened, but I had nothing to say, because nothing did happen. Eventually, after a whole week of avoiding Sam, which was literally hard because we lived next door, I decided to go to his place and end our little avoiding party that I started. I knew Sam was going to be home that day because it was his off day, and I waited for my parents to leave the house before going to Sam's place. His door was locked when I got there, but I let myself in since I knew where he hid his extra key. Sam had been surprised to see me and had asked why I was avoiding him for a week, and I had lied and told him I had some things going on personally, and I had wanted to sort out my emotions first before going about. Sam accepted my excuses and had invited me to join him for breakfast. From there, we went back to our normal banter, and I told him things about school, of course leaving out the part where I lied about everything about me. When I mentioned that I had a boyfriend, I noticed the shift in Sam's mood, and it was then I realized that Sam actually had feelings for me. He had never brought home a girlfriend, despite the fact that he lived alone. All of his family, his mom, dad, and 3 younger siblings, lived in a different state, and so if he had wanted to be promiscuous or anything like that, he had the chance. Besides, he was already a full-grown man. I tried to pry and ask about his girlfriend, but he said nothing, just ignored what I said, and tried changing the topic. I decided there and then to test him to see if he truly had feelings for me. I had moved in, and before he could understand what I was doing, I kissed him on the lips. Sam had been surprised, and he was just speechless and stared at me. I smiled, because that literally just confirmed his feelings for me. If he had really seen me as his sister, as my mom thought, he would have scolded me for what I did. From then on, Sam and I just automatically fell into a relationship. But I guess I really took Sam for granted. Well, not guessing, I did take him for granted. Whenever I was in school or with my friends, I didn't respond to his texts or calls. I only called him whenever I was less busy, and that was a few times. Sam still loved me, even though I was literally playing around with our relationship. 6 months after I graduated, Sam asked me to marry him, and I accepted his proposal under the condition that we moved to another new place entirely, and he agreed. We got married back home, though, with just our friends and families there to witness. Sam bought us a house with his savings in another town 6 hours away from where we stayed before, and we moved there. Things weren't exactly the same anymore as they were before, probably because Sam had to quit his job so we could move away, and he had to get another one. That one wasn't as good as the previous one he had, and we had to buy a lot of things too for our new house. Sorry, I meant Sam had to. I didn't contribute anything to all this. After getting everything we needed to start our new lives and also blend into society, we almost had nothing. Sam had to take out a loan to do some other things, so half the pay he got was poured into paying back the loan he took out. I was not satisfied sitting around doing nothing, especially because there was really nothing to do. Every day was the same old routine, and I was getting bored with it. Every day Sam went to work, I would clean the house and do the other basic chores, and then cook dinner and wait for Sam to get home before we ate. He'd gist me about his day, and whenever he asked about mine, I would just shrug because I had nothing really to talk about. Eventually, I started bugging Sam that I wanted to get a job, and he agreed. But everywhere I went, they wanted someone with experience, and that I didn't have because I was literally fresh out of school. I looked for a job unsuccessfully for a whole year, and I was so frustrated that period and used that almost all the time against Sam. Sam didn't mind that I was being unfair, though. He would still apologize despite knowing I was the one at fault, and somehow, instead of making me feel guilty, it made me angry. I thought then that he was just trying to make me into a bad person. Finally, I got a job, but at the same place that Sam worked. He had casually told me while he was telling me about his day that his boss wanted to get a new secretary because he fired the old one for not being efficient. Sam had told me that he would have allowed me to apply there, but he had always known the boss to be a very short-tempered person with an aggressive behavior. He didn't want to see me getting yelled at all the time in the office and being unable to do anything about it. I agreed with him then, but I went behind his back to apply for the job, and I was invited for an interview. I still did not tell Sam about it until he saw me sitting amongst the job seekers waiting to be interviewed. He had been shocked, but I didn't want to jinx my interview, so I turned and pretended like I didn't know him. I got interviewed later and went home, hoping I got the job because many people with different experiences applied for the position. Sam had gotten home and asked why I had gone behind his back to apply for the job he had clearly told me he didn't want me doing. I dismissed his worries as nothing and even told him I wasn't sure I was going to get the job, that I just applied just to pass time since I was literally jobless. Sam said nothing about it again until I was called up 2 weeks later that I got the job. I was so happy, but Sam clearly wasn't entirely pleased. When he tried to say so, I got angry and accused him of not wanting me to be happy. Before long, Sam gave up and allowed me to do me. Not that I was going to do anything else. Well, luckily for me, the boss had to travel out of the country to set up another branch, so he was gone for about 4 years. So there were no complaints whatsoever about my work. I made Sam promise not to let people at work know we were married, especially the bosses. Eventually, some of our colleagues found out, but were willing to keep the secret for us, so the executives in the company didn't find out. One time, my friends from school called me to come over to their place for a birthday party of a friend of ours, Cindy. I made up some lies about my husband being on a work trip, and that I was accompanying him so I couldn't go. The real reason I didn't want to go was because I knew that I would have to tell Sam the truth, and he might want to tag along because he had always wanted to know my friends from back school, and I obviously couldn't have that. So, I lied and avoided going to the party, and seeing their post on social media about the party made me kind of wistful. I started to get uncomfortable with living like I did, paying off debts and never having enough money to buy myself new clothes, particularly designers. I was not satisfied with the life I had anymore because I've always wanted more, even as a child. So yeah, our CEO came back finally after 4 years, and Sam had been worried because of me. He didn't want the boss yelling at me, but I managed to persuade him that it was nothing, and that I was probably going to do better than the former secretary. I did, of course. I was very smart, so for a whole month after the CEO was back, I was very professional and definitely good at my job. That was when the CEO started to notice me. We had a project we were working on, and we took days to work on it. So most times, I was usually home at very late hours and left very early, even before Sam. Sam tried to complain about the long work hours, but I discarded his complaint as nothing, especially when payday came and the bonus I got was extremely large. I had to go into the CEO's office to inform him because I thought of it first as a mistake, and he told me it wasn't, that it was because I did such good work. I didn't tell Sam about the bonus, though. I wanted to keep the money for myself. I knew that Sam would never take the money from me, and would even suggest I keep it for myself, because I deserved it, but I just selfishly wanted to keep it to myself. 3 months went by, and the CEO had to go back to the company he had established so he could sort out some issues that needed him, and he told me that I was going with him. I couldn't not go. He was the boss, and besides, he didn't even know I was married, so there was no valid excuse I could give for not wanting to go. And then again, I started to think of it as a good idea because I'd get to really travel out like I had always liked, and also lied about. When I told Sam about it, he hadn't been too happy to hear it, especially because I didn't even know when I'd be back, especially since the boss had gone and spent 4 years before. He told me to tell the CEO that I was actually married and that my husband didn't approve of my traveling, but I didn't want to, and we argued about it. Sam tried several times to persuade me not to go, until the night before I actually had to travel, and he brought it up again. I was so upset with him that I slept in the guest room and woke up earlier than usual. I got ready for the trip and left before he even had the chance to try and make things right between us. Sam left me several texts, but I didn't reply to any of them. I went alone on the trip with my boss. I had been the one to book a suite for the CEO at one of the most popular hotels in that country, and I, of course, booked one room for myself at a smaller, cheaper hotel that was closer to the company so I could save up the cost of transportation. But I was very surprised when my boss ordered that I book a suite for myself in the same hotel as him. I did, but I booked one smaller and not on the same floor as my boss. The next day, he had driven us to work himself, and we had gotten busy. By evening, I was pretty much exhausted and really hungry. I had been hoping to go up to my room and just order something so I could eat and sleep, but to my greatest surprise, the CEO had taken us to a very expensive restaurant to eat. I had never been to a restaurant as expensive as that. It was like dining like royalty, and it was everything that I had imagined, and more. I was giddy with excitement. I secretly took some pictures of the food and of the place when the CEO was distracted with a call. After dinner, we went back to our various suites in the hotel, and I had my beauty sleep. Everything about the room was so alluring. Within a week, we were done with what we came for, but we still stayed back. I didn't know why, but I couldn't ask because he was my boss. The CEO took me on a tour of the city we were in. It was really beautiful. Then we'd dine like royalty and then retire to our rooms. That was what we did every day, and I thought it was amazing because I got to live the life I've only ever lied about. I was living the real thing, and it felt amazing. It was until I was taking a stroll down the hotel lobby that I heard 2 staff gossiping about my boss and me. They were saying that they thought we were involved, but the separate rooms were just the confusing part. Somehow, from there, the idea began to form in my head. At that point, I was hardly paying any attention to Sam. He was the least of my priorities. He usually called me, but I was always making excuses about being tired and wanting to rest or being busy with work. Whenever we did speak, it was short and not the usual conversation you'd expect a married couple to have. So after the gossip I stumbled upon, I started to really imagine what it would be like if the CEO and I were together. It literally meant that I wouldn't even have to lie to my friends anymore, and I'd get the luxurious lifestyle I've always wanted. After a month of staying there, the CEO, were invited to a party, and it was a +1 party, so he took me alongside. He gave me his card to shop for the perfect dress, and I did. I had bought the most expensive dress I could find, along with matching heels and a purse to go with it. I even got matching earrings and a necklace to complete the look. I was like Cinderella with a godmother, except in this case, the godmother was my boss. We went to the party and people assumed I was his girlfriend, and the CEO didn't correct that, which surprised me. I was nervous throughout the party because most of the people there were very important people that I'd never dreamt of meeting. But despite that, I still enjoyed the evening. I ate different things that I don't even remember the names of, but all I remember is that they came in different shapes and sizes. I took 2 glasses of champagne before the CEO asked me to dance. When we had finished dancing, I drank another glass of champagne in such a rush that it made me feel slightly dizzy. The reason I drank the champagne so quickly was because when the CEO and I had been dancing, the chemistry between us was just something else, and we had almost kissed if not for the music stopping at that moment before it changed to another, but that was enough to jolt us back to our senses. When we got to the hotel and went to our various rooms, I heard a knock, and thinking it was room service, I opened up, only to find the CEO. He told me that he didn't want to be alone that night. We talked late into the night. It was surprising because I never knew the CEO could talk and also flirt that much. We ended up sharing the kiss we didn't share at the party. We did more than kiss too. We had sex that night. The sex was nothing like what I had with Sam and was pretty disappointing, but I didn't show him that, and I pretended like it was the best. He felt really pleased that he was able to satisfy me, and he even ordered flowers and a pair of diamond earrings to be sent up to my room the next day. Honestly, seeing the gift reminded me that I was supposedly married, and I felt really guilty, but then I just wanted to keep the gifts because of how expensive and sparkling they were. Sam called me that morning, but I ignored his calls, not because of my guilt. We stayed for another 3 weeks, and it was filled with receiving lots of gifts from the CEO. After each time we had sex, he'd get me gifts. Most times they were very expensive bags or clothes. Sometimes they were shoes, necklaces, and other things like that. Those were things I could only ever dream of owning. I was really happy with the gifts. But when it was time to go back, I remembered my husband and how we lived in the same house. He would find out about the clothes, bags, shoes, and jewelry sooner or later, and I had to think of something to tell him, so I arranged for my box to be brought in after I had gone. My intention had been to lie and say a friend sent it over as gifts for me. When I got home, Sam hadn't been very happy with me. Apparently, I ignored most of his messages and calls, and also, the picture of my almost kiss with the CEO made headlines in an article. My heart skipped a bit, and I lied on the spot about the cameraman manipulating the picture from his angle, making it look like that. Sam reluctantly believed me, and when I had settled in, because it was a Sunday, so we were both home, I told Sam about my friend, who wanted to send me some accessories the next day, and that she was only sending them because I called and told her I was already home. Sam looked like he wanted to say something, but he changed his mind and said nothing. He just stepped out and didn't come back to the house until very late in the evening. The CEO and I continued our affair, but I tried to hide it from Sam, especially because we worked in the same company and we also lived together. But it was kind of difficult because of the luxurious gifts the CEO was sending me. Sam, though, at one point, stopped asking about the gifts I was getting and instead ignored them. Well, I guess the truth cannot stay hidden for long because eventually my truth came out, and it turned out very ugly. So one very hot afternoon while I was at home, it was my day off, and I was just relaxing, trying to do some house chores. I even decided to cook Sam dinner because it had been so long since I did so. For some reason, I wanted to make him happy, and I thought that cooking him nice meals and listening to his work stories like I did in the past would probably get us past the new stumbling block that seemed to define our marriage. But as I was trying to wash the clothes, I heard a knock, and curious about who it might have been, I went to check the door. I was shocked when I saw the CEO right in front of my house. I mean, my house where I lived with Sam, his employee, my husband. When I opened the door nervously, he walked in and looked around the house like it was some piece of trash. And of course, he cited the small picture that had Sam and me on our wedding day. I suddenly became sweaty, and I tried to explain the reason I hadn't told him about my marriage, but he just laughed and told me he had always known about my marriage. Apparently, he didn't have the habit of employing people without checking their background first. I was shocked. So he knew all this time and had still been sleeping with me. When I asked him why he had an affair with me, if he had always known I was married, He told me that I clearly had not rejected his advances when he made them. At that moment, I felt ashamed of myself, and I couldn't say anything else because I knew he was telling the truth. He moved around the house, picked up the picture, looked at it, and then dropped it carelessly, splintering the surface a bit. And then he moved over to the washing machine that was still off, picked some of the clothes in the basket, and asked me if they were part of the ones he got me. I shook my head to give a negative answer. He kept talking about how he knew my husband clearly wasn't enough for me, how tempting he knew his money was to me, and how I continued sleeping with him while still married. I felt insulted, but I knew he was speaking the truth, and there was no way I could defend myself, so I just stood there while he insulted me thoroughly. I hadn't even known that Sam had walked in at that point because I was backing the door, and when the CEO had walked in, I had forgotten to close the door. The CEO, upon seeing Sam first, smirked and continued talking about our trip out of the country and how he seduced me. It was when Sam had walked further into the house that I noticed him. I began to panic and tried explaining the situation, but it was clear the two men weren't listening to me. I have never seen Sam so angry before. He looked so murderous at that moment, and he had asked the CEO to leave, but the CEO clearly had other plans and stayed where he was, recounting our sexual relationship to Sam, telling him how he, Sam, couldn't obviously meet my needs, and I had looked elsewhere as the gold digger that I was. He had picked up the clothes by the washer again, but this time, instead of looking at them as he did before, he threw them at my husband, clearly to humiliate him all the more. He told him that he couldn't even buy me expensive dresses as he could. Do you know what I did then? I laughed. No, not what you think. I had been panicking so much that when the CEO threw the clothes at Sam, what came out of my mouth was hysterical laughter, because I knew somehow that I was doomed. But Sam looked at me, and then he turned and left the house. The CEO left after he did, telling me he didn't want to see me at his office too, because he was firing me as he had no need for me anymore. It's been a week, and the only time Sam came back to the house was to drop off the divorce papers. I've called several times and texted him, but Sam wouldn't reply to any of them. I really want to get Sam back. I don't want to lose him, guys. Please, what do I do? Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been the most torturing, longest 1 month. I've been trolled so much that I cannot even step out for fear of being recognized, despite the fact that I didn't even release much information about me here. The insults from you guys have just affected my mental health so badly that I feel like you guys only have to know me physically to come harm me. The crazy thing about this whole situation is I have absolutely no one to talk to. When my parents heard everything I did to Sam, they wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. I thought it impossible to disown your only child, but guess what? My parents did, and they're sticking to it. Even my soft-hearted mom thought I had gone too far. I'm so upset. I'm so angry at myself. During this 1 month, I've self-reflected so much that now I understand that I've been a monstrous wife to Sam. I have never once been someone there for him, even though he had never been anything else but there for me. I have nagged and hated him. I have insulted him, degraded him, made him feel small. I have made him feel like he wasn't worth it when the truth is actually the opposite. I am the one who should have been grateful to have him. I am the one who should have adored him and loved him like there was nobody else on earth to love. Right now, there's nobody on earth that can even love me. I have wounded Sam with my words. I have caused him mental scars with my actions, and I think I'll forever pay for the consequences of my actions. Now, all the expensive dresses and bags and shoes I got are so meaningless to me. They upset me so much and remind me of how disgustingly I behaved. I have now burned some of them, and I sold the rest at very cheap prices just to get them off my hands. Everything I have ever had was from lying. I got friends from lying, I got a job from lying too. Sam was the only real thing in my life, and funny how the only real thing in my life I still couldn't keep. I feel like the worst human on earth. I know now that if I were married to me, I may not have stayed or endured the marriage as much as Sam did. He was the perfect man for me. He loved me with all my flaws, and I stupidly was still brave enough to treat him so poorly until just until I was able to break him into so many pieces that I don't even know how to put the pieces back together. I've lost him. I've lost Sam forever. I know a lot of people, when they lose something, wish to get it back, but I dare not even wish because I was the one who pushed Sam to the point of no return. Now there's no redemption for me. I'm lost. I'm drowning in the world of darkness I put myself in, and there's no one to pull me out. Sam is not here to pull me back out. Update. Hello, Reddit. This is my last post here, and I just wanted to tell you guys how lucky you are that you're not in my shoes right now. Well, I know you feel good cursing at me and insulting me because of how stupid and bad you guys think I am. I wish I were you right now and not the one in this awful situation, but I am, and there's no overriding it. A piece of advice? Don't ever be in my shoes. Thanks and goodbye. My husband can overreact so much that sometimes it gets on my toes. Something small happened, and then he made a big deal out of it, and I lost my marriage. My name is Dora, and I am 25 years old. I used to work at a company before I got married. I got married and I stopped working because my husband made me believe that he could take care of me, and there was no reason for me to work. The name of my husband is Derek. Derek and I had been married for about 2 years now. Derek is 30 years old, and he is a computer engineer. He works to support us, and I am happy that at least he understands that part of marriage. Derek and I met at a party that I organized after I was promoted a few years ago. That time I was still working. My best friend at that time, Jill, invited him over to the party, and we were introduced. I genuinely liked Derek at that time because he was a very good-looking and neat guy. But I didn't really pursue it because I was in a relationship at that time with my then-boyfriend. But what I didn't know at that time was that the feelings were mutual. We exchanged numbers and we got talking. At first we were just friends, but it grew from there. My boyfriend at that time was maltreating me, and it was Derek that was helping me go through everything. He was everything that my boyfriend wasn't. I broke up with my boyfriend at that time, and I started to really get to know Derek. It was all love from his end. I felt at peace with him. He made me feel safe. When he asked me out, I accepted, and we started dating. Jill was very happy for me because she knew that Derek was a nice guy, and he was going to treat me right. Derek and I dated for a few months, and I met his family after. He only had his grandmother left, and she was the nicest old lady I had ever met. We instantly connected, and she took me as her own daughter. After a few months, Derek proposed to me, and I accepted. I planned the wedding with my friend Jill, and it wasn't big because I wasn't really a fan of big events, so I made it intimate, and I was so happy. Derek and I agreed that it was best for me to stop working in order for us to build our family, and I accepted immediately because I didn't want to keep working. I made Derek understand that I wasn't ready to start a family yet because I was young, and I wasn't ready to have a child yet. I hadn't taken care of an infant before, and I knew that I had a lot to learn, and I wanted to be prepared for it before going into it. Derek acted like he understood my point, and so we went on with our lives. But a few months after the wedding, I became pregnant, and I was a mess of emotions. I didn't know what to do. Derek was supportive, but I knew that deep in his heart he was very happy about it. Even though I hated the pregnancy, his grandmother was so helpful with making me feel good about myself and coming over to stay with us to help me do some things because I was very weak at times. I was so grateful, and she was so excited about her first grandchild. Derek and I became so close because of how he was making sure that I was taken care of and how he was providing for me. I was somehow happy that I wasn't working at that time because it could have been hectic for me to combine work and pregnancy. My pregnancy journey wasn't smooth, but with me being surrounded with family, Jill, Grandma, and Derek, it was a little better. I started preparing for the arrival of the baby, and it wasn't long I became so attached to a child I haven't met yet. Few months later, our baby girl arrived, and I was in love instantly. I just wanted to make sure that I took care of her. Derek's grandmother helped me navigate through motherhood because I was pretty new to it, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I wanted to learn. My baby began to grow before my eyes, and I was so happy at that point I didn't know why I didn't want a child at first, because I was really in love. Derek was a great father. He was so good with our child, and it made me smile each time. It wasn't long after a while depression started with me. I was so depressed that I needed to start doing something on my own that would take me away from home every morning. My baby was a little grown now, and she was going to school. I decided to discuss with Derek about me going back to work. Derek was skeptical at first because he knew I didn't really like working, but after some time, he told me I was free to work if I really wanted to. Even though Derek had given his consent, the problem for me was the choice of work I was going to do. Deep down, I didn't want to find myself doing those boring jobs that didn't have anything entertaining attached to them. I wanted something that was fun and liberating, but I knew that would not go down well with Derek. I wanted to work at a bar or be a waitress. I just wanted things that involved fun dressing where I didn't have to wear corporate clothes all the time. So I decided to sneak out at nights whenever Derek was away on business, and I could just have me time. Some days I felt like I was a bad mother, but I knew I wasn't because I was taking care of my baby well, and me having time to myself wasn't bad at all. I made sure that no one knew about my little getaways. I could just go to a club, order drinks, dance, and just make random friends that we could just spend the night together gisting. I felt like I grew up too quickly, and I was doing what I was supposed to do as a child again. I got married early and I had a baby, but I couldn't blame anyone for it because I wanted to and I loved my husband. He was loyal and he was so supportive. It was just the way I felt. I felt like something was missing from my life, like something I should have done before settling down. It was nobody's fault because it had to do with me. But with everything that was going on in my life, I still made time with my family. I made sure that I had time for my husband and my daughter. Derek and I were not having issues at that time, though. We were making sure to be present in our children's lives, and we would always be present for movie nights, eat together, and have fun together. Derek and I were a good team, and I loved the way we did things together. I also loved taking care of my family and running around to get groceries and coming home to make dinner. I didn't cook all the time, though, because sometimes we ordered pizza or something light for dinner. Aside from it being the fastest thing to order, I loved pizza a lot and ordered it several times. I'm stressing my love for pizza and how often I ordered it because it has something to do with how I ended up cheating with my husband. One day, I ordered pizza as usual, but something very surprising happened. The pizza delivery guy that came on that particular day was very attractive, and it was hard not to notice. I was really attracted to him, and I couldn't hide it. There was just something about him and the way he acted that I really liked. I quickly took the pizza and tried to start up a conversation, but before I could get the chance to speak to him, Derek came downstairs and I could hear his voice in the background. I didn't want him to suspect anything, so I had to suppress the desire to start up a conversation. Days went by, and I still fantasized about the delivery guy. I kept wondering if I was ever going to see him again, and so when my daughter had suggested to Derek that she wanted pizza, I made sure to order from the same place and to be delivered by the same man. I really wished he was the one that was going to come again. Luckily for me, the same guy came to deliver the pizza again. I tried to start up a conversation with him and get him to exchange contacts with me, but he refused at first and said he didn't want to have anything to do with a married woman. I refused to let that stop me because I was very determined, and finally we exchanged contacts. We got talking online after that, and I was happy I got something that kept me busy. I got to know that his name was Drew along the line. Drew was really nice, and he was very flirtatious. We were talking, and there was flirting here and there, but we made sure to keep everything quiet and not too loud. After a few weeks of us chatting, I decided to let him deliver pizza to the house, since we couldn't be seen outside. When he came that day, I invited him, but before he could get inside the house, I saw my Derek driving towards the house, and so I had to let him go that day. He was really scared of getting caught and didn't waste time before running away. After that day, I chatted Drew up again, but he didn't respond, and I didn't know why. We were cool before, and all of a sudden he wasn't responding again. I guessed it was because he ran into Derek and he got scared. It was understandable because Drew and I were practically the same age, and it was possible that he got scared. I decided to just give Drew space because I felt like I was overwhelming him with everything, and I told myself that if he liked me like the way that I did, he had come around himself, so I stopped messaging him. I knew Drew liked me a lot because he was always flirtatious and suggested that he couldn't wait to sleep with me. Eventually, Derek and I continued with our normal lives, but this time around I knew that he started to suspect something was up because he kept coming back home very early and he was extra attentive to me. It felt like he knew something was wrong and he couldn't place his hand on it. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I made sure to eliminate chats and conversations I had with Drew. And I also made sure that he didn't find out the fact that I was sneaking out behind his back. It wasn't easy, and I knew that I was lying to a very good man, but there was nothing I could do. I always felt like I was missing out on something I should have enjoyed, like something I should have had, and I didn't. So I was making time for myself and doing everything that I could do. In order to make things up to me, Derek was trying in his capacity to close the gap that was made between us through me requesting to go back to work by making sure that he took me on dates. We were doing all types of outdoor activities like visiting parks with our daughter and going on walks together and going on dates. He was really trying his best, but I wanted more. I wanted something different, and he was not giving it to me. I didn't know why I felt that way, but I made sure to tune down my feelings for a while, since my husband had started to notice. But after a while, he took his attention away from me, and I was happy because we were like we used to, but I was dealing with my own problems. A few weeks later, Drew reached out to me that he wanted to come over, but I refused, and I decided that it was best if we just met somewhere more private. I wanted a place where nobody would see us. He agreed, and we met up that week to discuss our feelings and talk about how we could move our relationship to the next level. There wasn't a relationship at that time, though. It was more of an infatuation. We kept talking, and Drew's so flirty and nice that I told him I wanted to see him again. But I just didn't know how I was going to go about it. I decided that it was best I ordered another pizza so that we could use that as disguise. My husband was out of town, and my child was at her grandmother's home. It was a good way for me to be able to spend time with Drew. Drew came over, and we had fun together. I told myself that it was going to be the last time that it was going to happen, because I didn't want to continue cheating, but there was just something about Drew that kept bringing me back. I kept on seeing Drew behind my husband's back. Drew and I decided to take a break after a while because I felt like we were becoming very close, and I was enjoying what was happening too much. I didn't want to be caught and lose my marriage and my family, so we took a break, but it was unknown to me that Derek had started to suspect me, and he was monitoring my every move. Things got so heated that I told my friend Jill about my situation. I made her understand that I loved my husband, but on most times, I just want to leave the house, go to a quiet place, and maybe get a drink. Jill understood what I was saying, and she decided to help me through it. I didn't tell her about my cheating because I knew that it could break her since she was close to Derek, and I didn't want to put her in a position where she would have to choose between me and Derek. So I kept it to myself, and I made sure to just follow the advice she gave me, that I should try and go around the city in the morning, in order for me to get some fresh air. I didn't blame her for the advice because she was living her best life, and she had no problems at all. After some weeks of not talking with Drew, he finally called me. I even thought that he was not going to call at all, but he called to tell me that he missed me and he wanted to see me. I knew that I couldn't see him, but we could meet somehow. I told him that it was best if he gave me time for me to be able to make things happen for us. I also wanted to see him, and I knew that us meeting again after a long time was going to be mind-blowing, so I made plans one weekend for us to see. Derek was called into work last minute that day, and I wanted my daughter to go visit her grandmother. I made sure to order 2 large pizzas with extra meat, just like the way I like it. This was just a code me and Drew learned to use anytime we wanted to hook up. I told Drew that day that he should be the one to deliver it to my house, and he did. When he came over, we ate and watched our favorite movie, but hours into the night after we had a few drinks, we got drunk and started kissing. I would normally go into the room with him, but that night I was too drunk to think of that, and Drew was being very impatient, so we just had sex in the living room. I never expected what happened next after that because, to my surprise, Derek barged into the house and saw me on top of Derek. I was so drunk, but when he caught me, it felt like all the alcohol was washed out of my system, and I could see the disappointment in his eyes. He was really angry. I tried to run after him in order to explain to him about how I was sorry, but before I could get some clothes on, he was gone. Everything happened so fast that I was still phased, and when Drew wanted to comfort me, I totally ignored him. I was just thinking about how I was going to explain this simple mistake to my husband and my family. Deep in my mind, I was praying that my husband understood where I was coming from. It was a simple mistake, and nobody was above mistakes. For days after that, I didn't see Derek. It was as if he totally disappeared from me, but I was happy that he didn't tell his grandmother because she came with my daughter the day after I was caught, and we had a normal conversation. I was really hoping that things don't get complicated because it was as if I used my own hands to destroy the good marriage that I was enjoying in my home. Ever since the incident happened, I hadn't spoken to Drew, but I needed comfort. I needed somebody to tell me that everything was going to be all right, and there was no need to panic. Whenever I think about my daughter and my marriage, I become so afraid of what's to come. I stated that way being confused and not knowing what to expect until 2 weeks later when Derek's grandmother requested to see me. I thought she just wanted to see my daughter, but to my greatest surprise, she had already spoken to her grandchild and I was indirectly called for questioning. She was really angry and disappointed, and she almost threw things at me. I explained to her that it just happened, and it wasn't something that I planned. I thought she was going to use her maternal instincts to pity me and see things from my point of view, but she rained all sorts of insults on me for cheating on her son. I told her that it wasn't intentional and that I was sorry, but he drove me out of her house. I felt so ashamed of what I did that I begged her to try and speak to Derek for me, but it was useless because I already knew where she stood. There was nothing I could say that could change her mind, and she had already concluded that I was the worst mistake in her grandson's life. I went home that day, and I was so depressed. What was eating me up the most was the fact that I hadn't heard anything from Derek. He had completely gone mute on me. I kept calling him, but he was not responding. That's the worst of it all. I was scared that he was going to use my cheating as an excuse to cheat on me, and the thought of that made me angry. I gathered enough courage, and I told Jill about what happened, and she was so disappointed in me. I told her because I knew that she was the only one that could find Derek wherever he was hiding. My friend was so disappointed that she wanted to have nothing to do with me. She was so hurt, and she couldn't believe I did what I did to Derek. I still pleaded with her to speak to him in order for us to make sure that he was okay, but she left and I kept calling afterwards but got ignored. It was as if everything went quiet on me and they didn't want to have anything to do with me. I believe Derek is overreacting and needs to come back. I don't want to lose my marriage. Update. Hey everyone, I'm here with an update on it's been crazy, but life still went on, and when my daughter's birthday came, Derek didn't show up. My daughter kept asking me about him, and I was running out of answers. I felt that he should have at least considered our daughter and came back home. But as time went on, everything began to crumble slowly on me, and I started to struggle. The credit card I had began to decline payment, and I couldn't pay for our normal house bills again. I didn't know what was happening at first until I went to the bank to complain, and I was told that my husband had removed money from our joint account to his personal account, meaning that I had no access to his money. I didn't know how to feel because I had no job and I had no money. I was scared because didn't know how to survive. I decided that it was best if I go out to look for a job that could at least sustain my daughter and I, but that proved to be nothing because nobody was willing to employ me again in the companies I once worked for. The crazy thing was, Derek's grandmother would come to take my daughter and feed her, but she would get nothing for me. Derek gave her money to take care of only our daughter. That really angered me a lot, but one day, it all became words. Derek showed up randomly and served me divorce papers. He said he was done and wanted nothing to do with me. I begged him for the sake of our child in order for us to settle down and talk. He requested that it was only going to be possible if we talk with our lawyers present and that divorce was all he wanted. Even though I didn't have enough money for a lawyer, I was able to borrow some money and I afforded a cheap lawyer. I wished Derek didn't bring lawyers into our problem. I wished he could just listen to me so that we can solve the problem and move on with our lives. But he refused to hear me out. I know that I did something wrong, but I was begging him for forgiveness and felt he had punished me enough. I even thought that he could at least temper justice with mercy and consider our child and not throw me out of the house, but he was being totally heartless. Our divorce and battle for custody was insane. His lawyer were able to prove that I was an unfit mother who didn't have any source of income, and so Derek got full custody. I was really hurt and couldn't believe they made me look like a careless mother. He knew that my daughter was everything to me and I couldn't live without her, but he still went ahead with his plans. I know I always made her go to his grandmother's place whenever I wanted to sleep with Drew, but that shouldn't have been used against me. I begged Derek and called his grandmother to help speak to him and ask him reconsider the torture, but everybody ignored me, including my own best friend Jill. I believe Derek is a monster for what he did to me, and I regret ever marrying him. I lost my daughter just because he proved that I didn't have enough to take care of her. This is the worst pain ever. After passing through one of the toughest phases in my life, I still think that everything is going to be fine, even though it's not looking like that. I have moved on, but I still remember my daughter from time to time. I want to get at least 50% custody, so I'll make sure to work hard and start earning, even though I hate working. Derek wants nothing to do with me, and that's making it almost impossible to see my daughter. I hate my life so much right now, but I pray things get better.